Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of CEO and Market Expert Interviews. I'm your host, Lucian. Some of you know me as Triangle Investor from X. Today, we are covering ASX-listed uranium development and exploration company, Toro Energy Limited. Toro has projects in Western Australia, and we will talk about them with my guest, Richard Homsany, who is Executive Chairman for Toro. Richard, thank you for coming to my show for the first time. It is great to have you.
Yeah, Lucian, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be with you.
Thank you very much. Usually with my first timers, I start with their origin stories and backgrounds. So what's your background, 2 or 3 minute overview, please?
Sure. So I am a corporate lawyer and a certified practicing accountant by trade. I work primarily in the energy and resources industry, and I became a full-time executive at Toro at the beginning of 2017. My uranium industry experience predates my appointment at Toro. I left being a lawyer and joined a large diversified mining house in the mid 1990s. And that diversified mining house had operations in uranium, iron ore, copper, gold, amongst a number of things. So I started at iron ore operations, and when I moved to their head office, I had responsibilities at a number of operations from corporate, and it included the ERA mine Ranger in the Northern Territory, which I used to visit with some frequency in the late 1990s. However, since 2005, I've been involved with uranium either in an executive, non-executive, or legal advisor capacity, primarily as an executive since 2010, when I joined full-time at Mega Uranium Limited. And I then became a non-executive director at Toro in 2013 and assumed executive responsibilities there, as I said, at the beginning of 2017. So I have a decade's experience in uranium. I have a passion for uranium. It is certainly a very exciting time to be involved with uranium, not only from a spot price perspective, but particularly today with the news from our our national opposition leader about the proposed locations for 7 nuclear power sites. So we remain very bullish at Toro about the future of uranium in this country. So yeah, exciting times ahead, I think, Lucian.
Agreed. That was you, that was your background, but give us a 2 or 3 minute overview of the company that you run, and we will cover projects then after that, but one by one, news and other things. Give us a 2 or 3 minute overview of the company, please.
So Toro owns Toro's principal flagship asset is the Wiluna uranium project in Western Australia, 710 kilometres northeast of Perth. We have a resource there of 62.7 million pounds of U3O8 at a 200 ppm cutoff. Outside of Wiluna, we have regional exploration projects that account for another 28.2 million pounds of uranium. We also are with Wiluna, we're in a highly prospective gold belt. So during the years where uranium was not so strong in terms of investor sentiment, we drilled for gold and nickel, and we came up with very encouraging results. In fact, in the nickel, we came up with some spectacular results, grading up to 4% nickel in massive and semi-massive nickel sulfides. And we got a number of occurrences there. We got some very encouraging gold hits because we're in a prolific gold mining district. We also have a joint venture interest in Namibia with Deep Yellow Limited and JOGMEC in a project that isn't far from Deep Yellow's Tumas project. So we participate there. So we primarily a uranium developer because Wiluna is quite an advanced project. And yeah, we look forward to continuing with our development there.
Yeah, we will start with Wiluna because we have some fresh news, very excellent news. The company announced the outcomes of a refresh scoping study for the Lake Maitland. That is a deposit at Wiluna. Some impressive numbers there. Can you walk us through the numbers, changes from the original study, and maybe you can give us a presentation?
Sure. Look, up on the screen now, hopefully you all can see it, is a summary of the financial outcomes from our refresh Lake Maitland Scoping Study. I think it's very important to highlight, Lucian, that this is for Lake Maitland only. So Wiluna comprises of not only Lake Maitland, but we have deposits to the north, not far away, in Lakeway and Centipede Millipede. So the results we're presenting here is only one deposit within Wiluna, and the upside from here is immense. What these results show is that we could have a standalone operation at Lake Maitland comfortably, and the northern deposits in due course could sustain, or we think they will sustain if the current uranium price goes as expected, a mine of its own, a mining and processing operation of its own. So we performed a scoping study level assessment of the project in late 2022, assuming a US dollar price of $70 per pound U3O8, an exchange rate of 70 cents Australian against the US dollar. And because we have a vanadium byproduct, we assumed a $5.67 per pound V2O5 vanadium price. With the rise in the market for uranium, we decided that we would recut that study to see what it would look at contemporary pricing. So for this study that we released the results of yesterday, we assumed the current spot price of around $85. We used that as our price, and all other things remain constant, except we were conservative and assumed an 8% increase in all our costs since the late 2022 studies. So what that delivered for us is a substantial uplift in the net present value of the project, which is now at 832 million, which is a 35% rise in approximate numbers from the 2022 study. We also got a significant uplift in the total EBITDA for the project. Now, over the life of the project, there's generating an additional 534 million Australian dollar EBITDA, and total undiscounted cash flows also rose 500 million. So essentially, in Australian dollar terms, this project throws off cash of over $2 million per week. And we're only talking about one deposit within Wiluna here, Lucian. And the NPV I gave you is a pre-tax amount. In the release, we also gave revised operating costs and CapEx, which again is in line with the 8% increase, but our all-in sustaining cost is still at a stunning $30
unbelievable
per pound uranium. Sorry, the screen just shifted, which is a globally competitive. In fact, it's a leader in the cost curve, if you like, in terms of all-in sustaining cost. So whilst, yes, we did assume an increase in cost, which one must do because that's the right thing to do and the accurate thing to do.
Yeah,
we still have a very, very competitive project that will deliver significant returns to shareholders. And it's something that, you know, with the current stance on uranium development in this state, it just shows anyone who's looking, including the current government, that there is a major, significant, very financial, robust uranium industry that could thrive in Western Australia. We have a 17.5-year mine life. Over the life of that project, we'll produce 23 million pounds U3O8 and 12 million pounds vanadium pentoxide. We also have recently looked at how we can incorporate materials from those northern deposits in here, but I'll get to that later.
Mm-hmm.
But as on a standalone basis, this is, very compelling numbers. I just might add before we move on,
Sure.
that Lake Maitland is the only deposit we have at Toro that has a potential joint venture attached to it. We have Japanese joint venture partners in Itochu and JAWD, which is an acronym, JAURD, which is a syndicate of nuclear power companies out of Japan. They have the ability to joint venture with a payment of $39.6 million to us, and then participate 35-65, so a 35% interest in the project, and they contribute 35% to the costs of bringing this project into production. So for that reason alone, an evaluation of Lake Maitland on a standalone basis was very compelling for us, and we're very pleased with the outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Definitely sounds good. So, Richard, this should be a simple mining here. This is a very shallow deposit, right?
Yes, it's a shallow deposit, and mineralization literally starts from the surface, goes no deeper than 14 meters, but primarily the bulk of the uranium is within 10 meters of surface.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
the economics of it are very attractive, but it also means that we can't start mining it and digging holes until we have all of our permits in order, because we'll actually be starting to mine the uranium. So it's, once we get the go-ahead, we can bring this thing into production sooner rather than later.
Yeah, you can turn off the presentation now. We can continue with questions. Wiluna is comprised, just like you said, of 6 deposits in total. It's not just Lake Maitland. So what are the next steps for the ones besides Lake Maitland? Is it maybe to an integration of additional resources from these deposits to Lake Maitland?
Yes, so we are currently working on, and will publish soon, the outcomes of our study into a broader Wiluna uranium project.
Okay.
With a processing plant at Lake Maitland. Essentially, that involves bringing the analogous materials, so analogous to the Lake Maitland materials, which is clay-dominant materials, to see if we can bring down 2-3 million pounds from the northern deposits, maybe more, maybe less, and process them at Lake Maitland and increase our NPV and get it up over $1 billion, perhaps. I mean, if the uranium price alone goes up to $100 US, our NPV at Lake Maitland goes to $1.1 billion. So it's very sensitive and reactive in a massive way to the uranium price. So that is at Lakeway and at Centipede Millipede. Even though Centipede Millipede are 2 deposits, they're joined together and we tend to regard it as one. Also, we have 2 satellite projects that make up Wiluna. One is Dawson Hinkler and one is now Thana. Now, Dawson Hinkler is a lower grade deposit. We restated the resources there recently, and we doubled the resource from 10 million to 20 million, just in round numbers, 10 million to 20 million pounds U3O8. But at a triple figure or near triple figure uranium price, that small satellite deposit with a processing plant located not far away, all of a sudden becomes very economic. Now, Thana is further away, and it's a bit of a stretch to truck materials to a processing plant at either Lake Maitland or in the northern deposits. But again, that is, it has a uranium resource of 11 million pounds. It's something that can be mined in a very high uranium price environment, or it could be possibly down the track be integrated somehow into the mining schedule, but with some way from making a conclusion on that. But the most important thing to realize is that we are nearing completion of the design of a pilot plant for the purpose of the feasibility of Lake Maitland and Wiluna. So we hopefully will have some news on that imminently. We will hopefully have that pilot plant up and going in the second half of this year, and we will throw at that pilot plant as much varied material across all of our deposits as possible to reach a conclusion as to how well our hydrometallurgical circuit can handle the various types of materials that are present at Wiluna. We know with a large degree of confidence that the Lake Maitland clay dominant materials, because Lake Maitland is primarily clay, this pilot plant will work well for Lake Maitland. But for the other deposits, which have different lithologies and different characteristics, we are confident that the same processing plant will process those well, not as well as Lake Maitland, but well, and certainly much, much better than what was envisaged back in 2013-14, when a study on Wiluna and the outcomes of that study were published by Toro under previous management.
Okay, got it. You made a decision to reduce the cutoff grade to 100 ppm from 200 ppm at Dawson Hinkler. What was the rationale behind that move?
So look, most conferences that I attend, most ASX announcements that I see from uranium explorers, uranium producers are now starting to use a 100 ppm cutoff. So we thought it was prudent, particularly from an investor perspective, that we can start, like they can compare apples with apples. So Toro is in the process of restating its existing resource. Dawson Hinkler was one where we doubled the resource by doing so. We're waiting for an outcome on Lake Maitland to see if that makes any material difference. But we think that work is valid from an investor's hat. They need to see and be able to discern what our value is relative to other companies that are listed on the exchange.
You mentioned licenses, both federal and state environmental approvals, and all mining leases are granted. Amendments are still required. Can you specify which ones, what amendments?
Sure. So when the approvals were sought back in 2016 and granted in 16-17, both state and federal, there was an anticipation that the uranium policy in this state would change because of change in government was likely, not at federal level, but more at state level. So there was a strong desire to get the project that existed at that time, the parameters of the project that were known at that time, to be put in for approval, which is a whole of Wiluna approach: Lakeway, Centipede, Millipede, and Lake Maitland. Our work on the metallurgy since that time, so over a number of years, we're talking almost a decade, right? Let's say 7 years, 8 years. 8 years is probably a better number. We've spent a lot of research and development expenses in that time. Frugal, effective, efficient, targeted research and development work, but that comprised the significant bulk of our expenditure, to work out if there was a better way to approach Wiluna, a better way to not only mine Wiluna, but more importantly, how do you process the uranium ore at Wiluna? What eventuated was that our metallurgical team, strategic metallurgy, designed a process, and we tested it, at lab bench scale level, and the pilot plant takes it to a different level of confidence and feasibility. Again, it showed that with beneficiation, removing the clay, scrubbing, screening, cyclones, filtering the ore, I won't get into the process. It's been well published on our releases over the year.
Okay.
That we would reduce the amount of material that needs to go into the hydrometallurgical circuit and be processed using, chemicals and well-known techniques. So what we found is that you could basically reduce the amount of material that goes into the hydromet circuit by 75%. So instead of putting in 100 kilos, you put in 25 kilos, and you're putting in a highly upgraded material. Because you've removed all of the chlorides, you change the circuit, and you can use ion exchange ultimately, and you eliminate a couple of very capital intensive steps. So it basically recut the whole economics of it all. And it meant that Lake Maitland is where the processing plant should be located. So this is one of the amendments we would need to our existing approval, is to put the processing plant at Lake Maitland. But because of all of this, it's opened up this immense opportunity that perhaps is not well understood, is that because our whole project now can be looked at with a different lens, we are putting out numbers, we are putting out NPVs that are not only significantly better, you know, it's orders of magnitude more valuable than the project that was permitted. And one of the things that we could have done, which is what another company in Western Australia did, only one company did this, Cameco didn't, is you start digging a hole and you talk about substantial commencement being achieved. And substantial commencement of construction of the project was something that was a condition of our permits in WA. Mm-hmm. We could not dig a hole because what did we say? The uranium starts from surface. How do you start digging a hole when from surface you're getting uranium and then all of a sudden you're mining uranium? So we couldn't take what I would call a dysfunctional step of digging a hole anyway, just for the sake of digging a hole for that reason. But the overriding, the paramount reason is that the project that we want to build is orders of magnitude better than the one that was permitted. Like, you know, we didn't publish an NPV back 10 years ago, but everything now, even with 10 years of inflation, is so much better and so much easier from an environmental perspective. The legacy, the environmental footprint that you leave is everything is smaller. The reagent use, massively smaller. Electricity consumption, smaller. Everything is small. Everything is better. Everything is more economic. Now, we have permits. The legal position is that we do have permits. We just have one condition in it that we didn't meet. Now, in a normal case, if it was gold or copper, nickel, you would go to the government and get an amendment. That avenue with this current government is not open to us.
Yeah.
So when a window opens, not only will we want to amend that condition, we probably need to make a number of amendments, including the location of the processing plant, the ability to extract vanadium as a byproduct. What Ion Exchange did by changing the processing is give us an additional $100 million in revenue over the life of the project in Australian dollars from vanadium. That wasn't there before. So just that alone is a massive increment on the previous operation or the one that was sent to the government for approval. So this is an unbelievably positive thing. Why would you build a project that makes so much less money than you could otherwise make? You know, and no one else in WA has started to build their operation, even though one of them has the permit. And, you know, the reality of the situation is that if we were in Athabasca, it would take 10 years at least to permit this operation. But because we're in Athabasca or Canada, you know, and the government's supportive, no one would even be talking about the nonsense of distortions from political parties and ideologies.
Yeah, it's totally different.
If an Australian investor came on board today and said, do I go in Athabasca and wait 10 years, or should I come in Australia and wait the outcome maybe of not the next election, but the election after? I'm waiting less than I would wait in Athabasca. So you know, I don't think that point is well understood. And I'm happy to explain it to anyone who approaches me, contacts me, emails me, and explain it to them further, and I'll phone them and talk to them.
Okay,
But
it's nice to be transparent over here. I
yeah,
agree. Richard,
yeah,
there was a misunderstanding among certain investors on why did the company let their some mining license lapse, and if you can explain what are the environmental implications would you have been have if you renew them at the time?
if we renewed them at the time, then obviously we would be under a lot of pressure to start building a project. But again, we're going to be building a project and seeking amendments to those approvals anyway, because we want to build different processing steps. So we would be in exactly the same position,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Do we go ahead and build a project just to produce $1 of NPV, or do we go and build a project that could produce $8 of NPV? Like, it's a no-brainer. You want to build the one that does $8. There just needs to be a little bit more patience to get there, because the politics moved against you. But the politics, the winds of change are upon us, Lucian. It's a question of when, not if.
Understand.
It's all going to happen, and happen soon.
Got it. Richard, in an ideal world where the ban would be lifted and you decide to go into the production, how long would it take to bring Wiluna to production? And prior to that, of course, the financing, construction, offtakes, and everything that goes with that.
Sure. So look, the likelihood is we would build Lake Maitland first and work on Centipede, Millipede, and Lake Way to the north in parallel, which would be a second development at a future point in time. So with Lake Maitland, we would probably need 3.5, maybe 4 years to do it all from scratch today. We don't think financing the project will be of any concern, because we would have a Japanese joint venture partner. As you know, Japan don't have the ability for renewables like a country like Australia does. So they're relying on nuclear for their clean energy needs and to meet net zero. So they would be, and the way the joint venture is, they would be the likely buyer of the majority, if not all, of our product. And we think we'd get favourable financing conditions for that, with or without the aid of the Japanese, but probably with. But we think it would take, if it's uranium, and if we're going to be the first uranium development in WA, the first to go, we may need that extra, 6 to 12 months to get it all up and going. But we see it as, something that's far from insurmountable. If we were given the green light today, we would be happy to race ahead and start putting in plans to build this project.
Yeah, understood.
We would need to complete a DFS, but we think the work we've done to date is of such quality that we could do a DFS in a very short period of time.
That's great to hear. One topic that we have to discuss, and that is the uranium ban. As we know, the current government is persistent in keeping the uranium ban in Western Australia, but the opposition is getting more louder and things could be changing in the near future. How do you see the possibility of lifting the uranium mining ban in Western Australia anytime soon? And what are you hearing and seeing actually happening on that front?
Sure. So look, it's not a ban per se. There's no legal prohibition on uranium. It's just that the government will use policy to frustrate your development to the point where there is no development. We think the policy, the science is there, and the economic rationale is there to overturn that ban. As I said, it's one thing to say nuclear is not an option for Australia, even though our federal opposition leader today made a great announcement with his plans to include nuclear in Australia's energy mix. But it's another thing to say that we will not dig our uranium out and supply it to countries like Japan, the US, France, Korea, because, we don't believe in nuclear power. It's two separate questions. And that point is being increasingly understood by all, that uranium mining from WA to support the decarbonisation efforts of our trade allies, our political allies, our friends overseas, is something that is on the agenda in WA. Our Premier, the current Premier, came out and said in November last year that, decarbonising high emitting countries is part of WA's charter. It's part of WA's plans. So with that in mind, the mining of uranium is congruent with that principle. We are hearing that privately, the current government doesn't have any staunch, systemic, non-negotiable stance against uranium.
Mm-hmm.
It's an approach taken for political expediency. We don't think it's the ideology of the vast majority of the current government. It would be the ideology of a number of people you can count on one hand that dominates their policy making in that area. So we are starting to hear that there's little openings to have conversations. The opposition leader in WA, Libby Medham, spoke openly about supporting uranium development if her government was elected. You're hearing the opposition government at federal level come out and talk about nuclear. They've even transcended the whole uranium mining debate.
Yeah.
And the ideology of the WA government, which is the same party as in South Australia, where Boss Energy have their mine that has just started producing, they're identical parties. It's the Labor Party. In WA, they say no. In South Australia, they say yes. So what is the real ideology of this Labor Party? Is it genuine ideology? If you look at the empirical evidence just on that alone, it's not pure ideology. With the debate switching to nuclear, and I said transcending whether we should even mine uranium, we think it'll be a matter of time, particularly with the US banning the Russian, the imports from Russia of uranium. It's only a matter of time before countries put pressure on Australia to say, listen, there's a bifurcation. It's clear. There's Western supply. There's Eastern supply. We want Western supply. We want Australia to be a supplier of uranium. Please give us your uranium. So we think not only net zero, we think the bifurcation obviously helps, but the strong, strong global desire of everyone to get to net zero, and everyone understands that nuclear is the real way to get there in the shortest amount of time and probably the most efficient amount of time. Like a government like Western Australia can't hold out for much longer. There's just too many things at play, geopolitical things at play, global economic things at play, global security issues at play for a regional government to hold out. So, look, they've been good. I don't think they're, by and large, they're shutting the door on it. They just don't want to talk about it right now. But we think there's movement there for sure.
Yeah, and you have one young guy fighting the good fight, Will Shackle. He's unbelievable.
Yes. No,
Yeah.
so it's all topical at the moment, even more topical as of 12 hours ago. So, this is a good time for potential investors and current shareholders to really assess what Toro has. Right, to really assess what Toro has.
Yeah, actually, that's my next question. What magnitude the lifting of the ban can re-rate the stock? That is 100% sure. But what magnitude of re-rate could we see?
Oh, look, we think it's an order of magnitude. Our market cap could go up, in a short space of time, 3-4 times, and probably up to 8 to 10 times, right? When people finally see what Toro has, how advanced Toro is. And essentially, you've got pounds in the ground. We will be in a position next year to show you the mineable pounds in the ground. So it's all there. It's all been dug. It's all been tested. It's all been analysed. The work we're doing now is just showing you the most optimal way, the much, much better way to process the uranium out of the ground. And it shows you that the vast returns on offer from just one deposit, Lucian. Lake Maitland is one.
One
We've
of
got
6.
Lake Centipede, Millipede, a satellite in Dawson, a satellite in North Anna. It's one. So we really we really think that the government ideology and policy is just casting too dark a shadow on this company. It's not something that's systemic and underlying. It's not the First Nations people saying no uranium mining. It's just the ideology of probably three people, literally three people, right? Like, that is stopping this for now. Come again in a month's time, could be different. Talk to you again in 6 months' time, it could be a lot different. But it's a real opportunity here.
Let's discuss your other projects as well. You're in the process of demerging non-core assets that include nickel, gold, and base metal projects in Western Australia. How is that process going? Give us some details about this deal, and when can we expect this deal to close?
So given Toro's valuation issues in the face of the uranium policy here in Western Australia, we think the best way to get shareholders some value is to monetize our non-uranium assets or non-uranium development assets. Exploration assets, sorry. So we are in the process of working out how we're going to separate the gold and nickel from the uranium. We expect, given the softening in market conditions in the last month, we think that will take place in the second half of this year, and we should be in a position to update the market, sometime during next quarter. So each Toro shareholder will get a share in this new company and have the opportunity to invest further in priority to the public at large. We may or may not transfer one or two uranium projects there that don't impact on Wiluna, right? And have that as a pure exploration company and isolate the production profile solely in Toro Energy and have the exploration profile in this new company. So shareholders can expect to receive a free share, all things being equal.
Okay. Richard, who are the people on your management and advisory board, and how are they involved in everyday company activities?
So on our board, we have myself. We also have Richard Patricio, who's a uranium veteran and on the board of NextGen and ISO and CEO of Mega Uranium, all listed in Canada. We have Michelle Murrier, who's been on our board for about 9 years now and has a lot of investment experience and knowledge of uranium. In our management team, our technical team is led by Dr. Greg Shirtliff, who is a uranium veteran, worked for a number of years at Cameco, and has been with Toro now for over 10 years. We have a couple of other staff members on the administration side of things. And in terms of day-to-day, it's primarily myself and Greg who are driving the uranium business forward. And we have a board that's updated in real time rather than in, structured board meetings every few months. So we're very agile, we're very nimble, and our directors are only a phone call away at any point in time, and we're in frequent communication.
Okay, I want to cover some company metrics as well. How is the share structure looking now? How many shares are out? How many warrants options are there in the money?
Yeah, sure. So we've in round numbers, we've got 120 million shares on issue. We've got about 24 million in incentives and options for management and board. We also have, of those 24 million, we have 6.5 million of those options are listed, which is part of the financing undertaken last year. Mm-hmm. So we have 120 million shares on issue and about 6.5 million options on-issue trading, and the other 18 million is unlisted options and incentives.
Okay. What about cash? How is your current cash position?
So as at 31 March, that's all I'm legally allowed to tell you.
Of course.
Is we have 14 million in cash and in investments, 12 million, over 12 million in cash. We are very careful with our expenditures. We have a large tenement bank, so most of our money is spent on maintaining those tenements in good standing. I mean, Lake Maitland alone has a significant expenditure covenant, both in terms of development expenditure and rents and rates, statutory outgoings. So we, as I said, we have a large tenement holding, and the bulk of our money is spent there. We don't have an extensive workforce. Our metallurgy and engineering is outsourced, but our geology and admin is all in-house.
Okay. For how long do you believe that that amount will be sufficient before the next raise? Are you covered for 2024?
Yes, definitely. So we're covered for 2024. Depending upon the pace of development, that'll dictate what our funding needs will be next year, but we could comfortably survive on that for well over a year, if not 2 years, if not longer. It really does depend upon how things play out in the uranium space for us here in Western Australia. But we are acting and behaving as if this policy is going to change. So we will do core work, right? Core work where we can make up some time in this period where we're working adjacent to policy settings as opposed to under policy settings. We've obviously got to be careful we don't go excessive. We're not in Namibia. We're not in the Athabasca. We're not developing a project in Mali.
Yeah.
We still have that political risk. So it's a balancing act, but we are spending money to give confidence that this project will work at technical feasibility level. It'll stack up financially. The numbers are telling us that.
Okay.
So this pilot program is important.
Yeah. How much are you spending money? I mean, monthly cash burn for the company. In what range are we talking?
Look, it is like a accordion. I can go like this, so I can come back like this. But on average, to keep everything in good standing, it would be around 250 to about 250 a month. We can get away with 200 a month. And when the pilot plant is really raging ahead, it'll be, that'll be a $2 to $3 million project in itself. But most of our money is spent on our large tenement package and keeping those tenements in good standing and trying to advance them meaningfully rather than tokenly along the way. So the spin-out assets are in good condition, I will say. So, if the spin-out company eventuates in the next 6 or so months, it'll be good, well developed, well explored. Walk up targets will be drill ready.
Okay. What about management fees? What numbers are we talking here for management fees?
All up, the annual spend would be $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
We have a small, nimble team. Primarily, myself and Greg are full-time here. And we have other staff who are part-time, but significant part-time, like that. Toro is their primary position, but it's supplemented by work for other companies. But we do a lot ourselves. We try and keep, like I said, an eye on the cash walking out the door because, as I said, spending $1 in Namibia and spending $1 in WA on uranium are two separate foreign concepts. The dollar in Namibia will come back. The dollar in another African or North American jurisdiction will come back. In WA, we know it's a lot more difficult to get that dollar replenished. So we've got to be very careful, and we tend to do a lot of things ourselves. We've got a lot of knowledge on this project. I've been with Lake Maitland in one guise or another since April 2005. So almost 20 years I've had a continuous involvement with Lake Maitland. So it's great to see that we were able to attract a joint venture partner along the way. It's great to see Peter Dutton's announcement today.
Yeah.
And the winds of change, or at least having a proper, sophisticated conversation about where Australia is going, both not just uranium mining, but its energy needs, and what is our energy portfolio going to look like. At least now Australian voters have a chance to assess that and vote for, and have the option of voting for someone who believes in it.
Definitely. One other question. I want to hear your percentage of the insider ownership. How much skin in the game does the management have in the company?
So overall, it's less than 10%, right? We have incentives, but they're large stretch incentives. Our major shareholder, one of our directors is the CEO of, and they own about 7% of the company. And the rest of us, we put in money. Two directors put in money in a recent financing. And yeah, so overall, it's probably around 9%, 8 to 9% in that bracket.
Okay, got it. We didn't discuss Namibian assets. I know it's not your flagship project. You have 15% ownership over there, but can you give me an overview of those assets?
Sure. So look, we own a joint venture interest in common with DPLO and JOGMEC in assets near DPLO's existing projects in Namibia. And there are regular joint venture meetings. There's engagement by all joint venture parties. We run through budgets. We look at exploration drilling before it takes place. We look at the results of that exploration drilling after it takes place. So that's still early stage and it needs more work. But for the time being, that joint venture runs, operates. There's administration that goes with it. So all parties at the moment are in that JV. In the future, maybe sooner than later, there might be some change. But for the time being, Toro's happy to be in that JV and participate and keep that operational and going and funded.
Yeah. Final question, Richard. What and when can investors expect some news flow from the company?
Look, we are working on the possibility of restating all of our resources at 100 ppm, including Lake Maitland. We have pilot plant progress. We have this broader study at Wiluna, whether we can bring down to Lake Maitland some pounds and get the NPV of that project, as I said, up even further. So all of that work is in the short term. And then, of course, as our pilot plant progresses and we're able to get results of that pilot plant work, that'll inform our next technical direction. But a lot of the work we've done at scoping study level is quite significant. It's quite good. It's of a good quality. SRK were our lead manager on that. So the engineering and the metallurgy are done at a very high standard. And yeah, the pilot plant's just very important, Lucian, because that depends on which way we pivot. But there's no doubt if there was a policy shift in Western Australia, or at least the hint or winds of policy shift in Western Australia, that would have much more impact on our valuation than anything we ourselves can do. So in essence, we can sit there and bang away and complain. We try to be very respectful, and we are very respectful of the government. We do have state government permits. We legally hold permits.
Yeah.
We need to make changes to those permits. And we know that we're going to go to the bottom of the pile and not be looked at if we put them in. We don't want to ask the government a question they're going to clearly say no to. So, we're playing our part. There is advocacy, both individual company level and industry level. It requires some patience, but if you, like I said, you compare apples with apples, you look at 100 ppm resources, you look at the political settings and how you get permits in other jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And, even though the current ideology isn't there, we're not light years behind. In many respects, we could be quicker than some other countries. But, I'm not an expert in any other country. But, the fact of the matter is we're in a good position. We're in a good position.
Yeah, that was Executive Chairman for Toro Energy. Richard, thank you for coming to my show, and I look forward to host you again with fresh updates on your projects, and keep them going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucian. Much appreciated. Have a good day.